Dear students, I am Dr. Srinivas Goli, Assistant Professor in Jawaharlal Nehru University. Today, under MHRD UGC E-Pathshala program, under a paper called Population Structure and Characteristics, I am teaching a module on gender-based violence. The violence concept, as WHO defines as, violence is the intentional use of physical force, power, threatened or actual against oneself, another person, or against a group or a community, which either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, underdevelopment, or deprivation. If this is committed against a woman or a man by the opposite sex, is called gender-based violence. Gender-based violence often synonymously used with women's violence, but violence against a man by a woman is equally harmful than a violence against a man by a woman. So, if this both includes, is called as gender-based violence. There are four modes in which violence may be inflicted: are physical, sexual, psychological, attack, and deprivation. For example, if you look at this particular diagram, which basically highlights the two important violences, physical and sexual, which is mostly controlled by power. The violence obtained also leads to secondary processes of abuse, particularly using intimidation, using emotional abuse, using isolation, using children abuse, using male privilege, using economic abuse, using coercive and threatening threats. Three subtypes according to the victim-perpetrator relationship. The violence is basically classified into three subtypes according to the victim-perpetrator relationships. The one is self-directed violence. This includes violence that a person inflicts upon himself or herself. It includes suicide thoughts, attempted suicide or completed suicide, self-abuse or self-mutilation. If it is either committed by either sex, is called gender violence, or if it is committed by male, it is a male violence. If it committed by female, it is a female violence. The interpersonal violence, the violence inflicted by another individual or a small group of individuals, includes family, intimate partner violence and community violence. Often gender-based violence is considered to be the interpersonal violence, more synonymously used as an interpersonal violence, but other two violences also important when we are dealing gender-based violence. The another form is collective violence. Collective violence inflicted by larger groups, states, organized political groups, militia groups, terrorist organizations, includes social violence, economic violence, and political violence. So this also often creates a gender-based situation for gender-based violence. But predominantly, if we in the literature, if you look at the literature, we have three types of violences which often termed as gender-based violences. The one is domestic violence, then intimate partner violence, Domestic violence basically is the violence committed by any of the family members towards is either male or female. Sex. The intimate partner violence is the violence committed by the life partner or spouse, one spouse towards another spouse. Here these pictures will depict you the different forms of violence. If you look at the first picture where a male beating wife through a thread, and if you look at the second picture where a male is kicking his wife through leg, and in the third a male hitting a female on her face, like in the second row first figure where a female hitting is the male partner, and in the second row the right side figure where both male female throwing things each other, that's also interspousal violence, intimate partner violence toward each other. So the violence can be mutual but to each other, or violence against women or violence against men by each of the opposite partners. 1 in 3 women globally will experiencing the violence during her lifetime. I repeat again, 1 in 3 women globally are experiencing violence in her lifetime, obtained at the hands of their intimate partner. If you want to deal domestic violence separately and in elaborative manner, the domestic violence can be defined as, it means the family and intimate partner violence, which also includes child abuse and abuse of elderly, usually takes place in a home. The domestic violence can be defined as, the domestic violence, it means family and intimate partner violence, which also includes child abuse and abuse of elderly, usually takes place at home. But this can be the actors of domestic violence can be anybody, either husband, mother-in-law, father-in-law, father, mother, brother, or anybody. It cannot be restricted to any single member of the household. It can be any member of the household. Also called intimate partner abuse. Domestic violence, one small part of domestic violence is also intimate partner abuse, intimate partner violence. This intimate partner violence is unlike the domestic violence, is the factor in this particular violence is the spouse, the opposite spouse. When wife was beaten by husband or husband beaten by wife, physical or sexual exploitation of husband on wife or wife on husband is considered to be the intimate partner violence. It is one of the most common forms of gender-based violence and often characterized by long-term partners of abusive behavior and control. Gender-based violence is broader than domestic violence. Gender-based is a type of violence which is directed against a person on the basis of gender or sex. While both males and females are subject to the gender-based violence, women and girls are the main victims. Gender-based violence means any act or threats of violence based on gender that likely to result in physical, sexual, or psychological harm or suffering to women. Also includes all forms of violence against women over the entire life cycle, female feticides, female infanticide, etc. Gender-based violence can also include sexual violence, domestic violence, emotional and psychological abuse, forced prostitution, trafficking for forced labor or prostitution, sexual exploitation and sexual harassment, harmful traditions, practices, Example, female genital mutilation and forced marriages. Discriminatory practices based on gender. Violence is bigger threat to the health of women of age 15 to 49 than any other cancer, malaria or traffic accidents are combined together. So it is a big not only social problem but also an health problem. The intimate partner violence is another important concept under gender-based violence. Any behavior within an intimate relationship that causes physical, psychological, sexual harm to those in the relationship results in intimate partner violence. This includes acts of physical aggression, psychological abuse, forced intercourse, and other forms of sexual coercion, and various controlling behaviors such as isolating a person from their family, friends, restricting their movements, etc. In a way, intimate partner violence is a major subset of domestic violence and gender-based violence. The gender-based violence also operates in a cyclic phases. It is also important to learn study the gender-based violence in a life course approach and in the life cycle approach. If you look at the life cycle approach of gender-based violence, it has 6 phases of the life cycle. The first phase is the prenatal. In the prenatal phase of life, the violence includes sex-selective abortion, battering include pregnancy and coercive pregnancy. In the second phase, which is infancy, includes female infanticides, emotional and physical abuse, differential access to food and medical care of girls and infants. Of course, the third phase is childhood, which includes child marriages, genital mutilation, sexual abuse by family members and strangers, differential access to food and medical care, and child prostitution. Especially if you look at in childhood gender-based violences, child marriage is one of the important problem in India. 1 in 3 child marriages in the world is occurring in India. For every 1 hour, there are 150 child marriages happening around India. Child marriage is a huge issue which is often results into conflicts and violence, because child marriage generally leads to lower autonomy, lesser empowerment, lower status of women, which even leads to makes women difficulty in complaining about the gender-based violence. And child marriages results into the lower. It's not only child marriage is not only a moral issue but a human right issue, but is a huge economic issue. At the adolescent phase, which includes dating and courtship of violence in the dating and companionship, economically coerced sex, sexual abuse in the workplace, rape, sexual harassment, forced prostitution, trafficking of women is some of the important forms of gender-based violence during adolescent phase. India also one of the place where it's the most unsafe for the adolescent girls in the world. Most of the Indian cities are considered to be very unsafe for the adolescent girls in hard hours. In the third phase of fifth phase of the gender-based violence is reproductive phase, which often described as 15 to 49 years, which includes abuse by intimate partners, abuse by other family members, often mother-in-law or father-in-law or other brothers of the partner, and often even mother and father. Most important abuses during reproductive period includes marital rape, dowry abuse and murders, and partner homicide, psychological abuse, sexual abuse in the workplace, and sexual harassment. The last phase of the gender-based violence includes abuse of widows and elderly abuse. India, particularly if you take Indian example, India is one of the fastest growing economy, and where female life expectancy is higher than male, which often leads to left behind females. And left behind females often face a violent opposition from the neighbors and the other community members. The consequence of gender-based violence is one important criteria need to be studied. The consequence of gender-based violence is very important. Gender-based violence leads to many fatal outcomes, non-fatal outcomes. The fatal outcomes includes homicide, suicide, maternal mortality, and other important the life-threatening problem. Non-fatal outcomes includes physical injury, functional impairment, permanent disability, poor susceptibility to health. The chronic diseases also sometimes it is also result from the gender-based violence. Most important is the mental health issues or psychological issues which is often comes out of gender-based violence. Post-traumatic stress, depression is one of the important mental and psychological issues comes out of the gender-based violence. Negative health behaviors is also one of the important outcome of gender-based violence, which is smoking, using drugs, habituating to the drugs, sexually risk behavior, physical inactivity, and the other important risky health behaviors. Gender-based violence also leads to a lot of reproductive problems, especially reproductive health problems. Unwanted pregnancy is one of the important outcome of marital rape, and it often leads to the contacting the disease like STDs and HIV. Often the marital rape or sexual attack also takes women into the problems like gynecological or obstetric problems, unsafe abortion, pregnancy complication, miscarriages, low birth weight, or pelvic injuries, or so on. Therefore, the gender-based violence is a very important public health issue and also socio-economic issue. If you look at some of the empirical results from my own survey, it reveals that any violence is causing live birth with complication more than the women who are not facing any violence. But often we have faced a lot of problem in measuring gender-based violence, particularly in a patriarchal society like India. If you look at state level statistics from National Family Health Survey, we have more reporting from the developed state like South India, like Kerala, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, Andhra, compared to the states like Bihar, Uttar Pradesh. Therefore, it is very difficult for us to measure the actual level of gender violence. The more empowered women are reporting more compared to those women actually facing them more. Those women who are facing the gender-based violence more, they often even not realizing this as their violence, and it is a violation of their basic rights. Because lack of knowledge on the issue, lack of knowledge on the legal sanctions, lack of knowledge on the legal rights, they often fail to report or realize the gender-based violence. For example, in the same National Family Health Survey, there are the questions about the wife justifying the wife beating. When women were asked that whether if your husband beats you, how far it is justified, then 97% women says that if I do mistake, my husband can beat me. So this kind of answers will tell us that how far women are empowered or to know that the gender-based violence is a crime, and they are. For example, if you look at percentage of currently married women in age group 15 to 49 who have experienced spousal violence ever in past 12 months by type of violence from the National Family Health Survey, reveals that emotional violence in past 12 months it is 11% and in lifetime it is 15%. This is also in spite of underreporting. These are the figures we have. And in the physical violence, we have as high as 35% in the lifetime and 21% in the past 12 months. In the sexual violence, we have 10% in the lifetime and 7% in the past 12 months. The physical or sexual violence, we have 37% in the lifetime and 24% in the past 12 months. The physical and sexual or emotional violence is 39% in the lifetime compared to 27% in the last 2 months. So all this shows that in spite of a reporting problem, we have high prevalences of intimate partner violence or domestic violence in India. Is another figure which shows that percentage of currently married women aged 15 to 49 who have experienced emotional violence by their husbands. The first is threatened to hurt or harm her someone close to her. It says that in the past 12 months almost 3% and ever it's 5%. Insulted or made her feel bad about herself. In the past 12 months it is 6%, in the lifetime it is 8%. Humiliated her in front of others. In the past 12 months it is 9%, in the lifetime it is 12%. This also indicates that there is a huge intraspousal tensions and violence against the women. How we can overcome the gender-based violence? How we can remove the gender-based violence? The main important tool for removing gender-based violence is gender mainstreaming, empowering women, increasing women autonomy, building women agency. These are the gender mainstreaming includes mainstream of gender perspective in the process of assessing implications for women and men of any planned action, including legislation, programs in any area and at all the levels. It is a strategy for making the concerns and experiences of women as well as of men an integral part of design, implementation, monitoring and evolution of policies and programs in all political, economic and social spheres, so that women and men benefit equally and the inequality is not perpetuated. The basic principles of gender mainstreaming is according to UN Division of Advancement of Women, and principles include advocate accountability mechanism for monitoring progress need to be established. The initial identification of issues and problems across the areas of activity should be such that gender differences and disparities, especially gender-based violence, be diagnosed. Assumption that issues or problems are neutral for gender equality perspective should never be made. Gender analysis should always be carried out, especially the measuring gender-based violence is a basic task. Clear political will and allocation of adequate resources for measuring, monitoring gender-based violence is very important. Gender mainstreaming also requires that efforts to broaden of women's equitable participation at all levels of decision making is very important, which allow women to come out and report the gender-based violence. Making legal system more friendly and women friendly is important. Mainstreaming does not replace the need for targeting women-specific policies and programs and positive legislation, nor does it do away with the need of gender units of focal points. So, gender-based violence is a social, psychological, health, economic issue and political issue too. So, overcoming gender-based violence needs first measuring it correctly and taking appropriate legal and social legal steps and initiating social institutions to overcome such violence is very important.